Welcome to the Revealed Podcast, where your stories are revealed and God is revealed in your story. You'll hear stories from people who are connected to the Red Hills region of Southwest Georgia. The people who share come from all walks of life. They're male and female, and they have different backgrounds. Some stories will leave you wondering how the storyteller ever survived. Others are simple but will touch your heart. We hope the stories that you hear encourage you in your own walk. And my name is Angie Durham, and I'm your host. I'm excited to have Sarah Shearer in the studio with me today. Sarah, I don't know much about you, so we're going to have fun getting to know one another. Where are you from originally?
I was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, but I have spent my entire life here in Thomasville, Georgia.
Do you speak any Russian?
No, I get that question quite often. I speak Spanish, but I don't speak Russian.
Have you ever had a desire to learn Russian?
I did until I saw that they had a different character system, and then I decided that I was too lazy to do that, so I prefer to stick with languages that are basic alphabet. So no, I haven't delved into Russian.
Well, I'm impressed that you can even speak Spanish.
That's fun. That wasn't too hard to learn.
I do know that you do that as a living, correct? You tutor people in how to speak Spanish, and they're taking Spanish classes, and you can help them get through all that?
Yes, ma'am. I tutor, and my degree is in Spanish, and I've translated in doctor's offices for years and translated overseas in Central America for different medical trips or mission trips, things like that. So I enjoy translating and tutor as well. So anyway, I get to use my Spanish. I got to use it at the store yesterday. Somebody didn't speak English. So anywhere I get to use it is fun.
Well, I'm very impressed with that for sure.
It's definitely a passion of mine. I love it's a beautiful, beautiful language.
It is if you can speak it.
Yeah.
But somebody like me trying to speak it, it doesn't sound so pretty.
It does take work. I may have lied before. It does take a little bit of work to learn it, but it's worth it.
And you know, I have this really bad habit. If I'm around somebody that has a different accent, when I'm talking to them, I swear I pick up their accent.
That's funny.
How crazy is that?
That is funny.
And I will start laughing like people. I don't know. It's
Maybe
weird.
you just like have an empathetic spirit or something.
I don't know what that is.
Ironically, I'm terrible with accents. I can't do a Spanish accent. I can't do a Russian accent. I can barely do a British accent. Like, I'm terrible with accents.
See, I can nail the accents, but I can't speak the language.
Well, there you go. We each have our things.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that the truth? I know that you are married, and so tell me your husband's name.
My husband's name is Lucas, and we've been married since December 7th of 2019.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And you all do live in Thomasville, correct?
Well, we live like right outside of Thomasville in Boston, in the country.
In the big town of Boston. Yeah.
Between Boston and Barwick, so out in the middle of nowhere, but I like it.
Oh, I bet. I'm sure you can hear lots of crickets.
Yes, you can hear everything, and beautiful sunsets and fields and hundreds of acres of land. It's great. I don't think I want to come back to the city.
Is Lucas originally from the Boston area?
Yes, we actually live in his grandparents' farmhouse that they lived in and raised his mother and her siblings in. So his family roots are in this area, but he's moved around more throughout his life. But he was born in Thomasville, so he's from around here.
Everybody seems to know everybody's history around here because, as you and I were saying, when you grow up in Thomasville, everybody still calls you by your maiden name.
Yep.
So
I'll be excited to be Sarah Shearer on this podcast.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I know. Yeah, even though, like I was telling you, October will make 27 years that I've been married, and I do still have people say, "Hey, let me introduce you to Angie Carnline." I'm like, "No, nope. I'm Angie Durham."
It's about time to get it right.
Yeah, but you know how we were talking too about how people will not pronounce your name correctly, and I wanted to make sure I said Shearer correctly and not Shearer or something off the wall. But you know, you would think Durham is such an easy last name to pronounce.
Yes, I would.
Guess what I get called all the time? Durham.
I guess that's kind of a southern thing, like Durham. I don't know. I don't know,
but I always say Durham.
Like Raleigh, Durham.
Yes, exactly, like Durham, North Carolina. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, oh well.
I got you.
Yeah. Thank you. So tell me a little bit about how you and your husband met.
We've actually known each other for a long time. He was roommates with my brother back when they moved out into their inaugural teenage apartment. And so he was friends with my sister and my brother, but he's a little bit older than me. So I was a kid when he was a teenager. And so I just always thought he was a nice guy, but he moved off and did his thing, and we reconnected about 2.5 years ago over Twitter while he was living in Wisconsin. We started talking about The Office, which is our favorite TV show, and we talked about that for a long time, and then it morphed into deeper theological topics, and we just really hit it off long distance. And it was kind of like my modern fantasy of You've Got Mail was writing letters back and forth, and that's how we fell in love, was with each other's written communication styles.
Who knows how many people have been brought together by The Office?
Right. I don't know. Probably a lot. I sent them our story, and I tried to like get on their podcast with our Office story, but they haven't responded yet.
Well, maybe that's coming.
Yes, maybe so.
Yeah. My oldest daughter, is a huge fan of The Office, and she told her dad and me, "You've got to watch this show." And of course, when I first started watching it, I was like, what?
It's kind of weird. I didn't like it at first.
And then I got hooked.
Yeah.
So I probably don't know it as well as you do.
Yeah, we're pretty nerdy about it.
Yeah. But it is funny.
It is.
So you just mentioned too that you have a brother and a sister. Are those the only siblings you have?
Yes, I have an older brother and an older sister. So Garen and Katrina.
Okay. And do they live around here?
They don't. My brother lives in North Georgia with his wife and children, and my sister lives in Augusta with her children. I have 5 nieces and nephews between the two of them.
And do you guys get to see each other very often?
Not as often as I'd like, but more often than some people get to see their siblings. I would say, once every 3 to 4 months. We saw each other at 4th of July and birthday here and there and holidays. And I'm going to see my sister. She's going to be at the beach this weekend, so I'm going to go visit her while she's down there. So we stay in touch. We have our little group chat, and we all stay in touch pretty regularly.
Nice.
It's hard to get back and forth when everybody's got busy schedules, but do our best.
It is. That is difficult to do. And if you guys see each other every 3 to 4 months, that's pretty doggone good.
Yeah, it is. I miss seeing my nieces and nephews. I wish I saw them more often. They grow so fast.
Well, one of the things that I like to do is ask a random question.
Okay.
So I'm going to throw you off guard a little bit
All right.
and ask you. So if you could do something dangerous just once with no risk, what would you do?
Something dangerous. Ooh. Is skydiving considered dangerous?
Yes.
That sounds like it would be fun.
Why?
I don't know. Just like an adrenaline rush. I might get scared once I got up there. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess since I have a fear of heights, skydiving would not appeal to me in any way. So you mentioned North Georgia and your brother living up there. We were just in Lake Blue Ridge last week, and all over Lake Blue Ridge, they have rope swings. And so we found one of the rope swings, and the kids did it first, and they were brave, and, they were going really high. And I said, okay, I can do this. So I go to get up on the little ledge thingy, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't
not going to happen.
But I did. I did. I went down a little bit farther from the ledge they had, and I found like this stump thing, and I was okay standing there. And I finally just said, okay, Angie, you are going to do this. And I had so much fun. I was so glad I did it.
Wow.
But jumping out of an airplane, Sarah?
In theory, I don't know. When you say dangerous, what if is you talking like just risky or something like against the law?
Ooh, well, I wouldn't want you to get in trouble now. But go ahead. I mean, this is just for fun.
I've always thought it'd be fun, like walking through an airport when you see like a really exotic location. It'd be fun to just kind of like sneak on that plane and go to whatever that location. I mean, I would never do that, but that seems like it would be dangerous.
Well, and I know you mentioned that you like to travel.
I do.
So, yeah, go for it,
yeah,
Sarah.
I mean, I'm not going to go for it, but in my dreams.
There you go. It's all just in fun. I know you and I talked a little bit, of course, before we started talking today, and I think you have a very interesting story. And I know that before we started talking today, you had prayed about what you were going to talk about. So why don't you just kind of lead us into what your story is?
Okay. As I mentioned before, I was born in St. Petersburg, Russia. I was taken from the hospital, I suppose, to an orphanage right after I was born. And so I spent the first several months of my life in the orphanage. And I can't really say much about what went on then because
You don't
I don't remember
a thing.
But meanwhile, while I was a baby in Russia, my family had just moved to Thomasville. This was in the early 90s. They had moved from Florida to the Thomasville area and were getting established in church and meeting people. And they happened to hear the summer of 93, they heard through the Thomasville grapevine about this little baby that was available for adoption in Russia. And I guess my parents, being very adventurous, said, well, we want to know more about that. And they already had two teenagers, a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. So they weren't the prototype for starting over with a baby, but they found out about me through the Open Door Adoption Agency. And they said, well, we'll take her. So they started the process of that international adoption. And on the Open Door side of things, it was actually their first international adoption. So they'd never worked outside the United States. That was before the huge trend of international adoption really took off. It was just starting to become a more prevalent thing. And so the agency had taken kind of a test trip to Russia to see, is this something that we can do? So a few people from Thomasville traveled there and visited different orphanages, and their trip seemed to be rather unsuccessful because the Russian officials were pretty wary of working with a U.S. agency. There wasn't a lot of trust there, but they ended up going to this last orphanage. I believe it was the last one. It sounds more dramatic if it was the last one. I think it was the last one.
We'll just say that.
Yeah, I think it was the last one. And the orphanage said, we really don't want to work with you, but if you can find a family for this baby, then maybe we'll work with you. And the baby was me, and I was said to have a lot of really serious medical difficulties, and they had me diagnosed with like all sorts of like heart disease, kidney failure. They said I was mentally retarded. I mean, I had like a whole paragraph of all of the things that were wrong with me that were irreparable. And so to them, I kind of looked like a lost cause. And so they thought nobody's going to find a family for her. But they took some pictures and they came back and started showing the pictures around. And my parents, even despite all of that, like if I had seen that paragraph with the information, I don't think I would have adopted me. But they did, and they said, we want to do this. They had a desire to adopt for several years, and it had just never come to fruition. And so they started the process and home about 6 months later. Although, even though it was only 6 months, my mom said it was her longest labor. Just all the paperwork and not being able to see your baby. And,
oh, yes.
And then they went in the dead of a Russian winter to get me, all four of them. So they all traveled to Russia. My sister got out of school. She was at Brookwood at the time, and they let her out of school, and they all traveled there and brought me back.
So you were 6 months old then when you were adopted?
I was 10 months old.
10 months old.
Yeah, I was about 4 months old when the agency came to Russia, and then I think it was another 6 months or so. So my parents brought me home in February of 94.
Your parents really are brave because
truly.
Well, I mean, to hear all of those things that could potentially be wrong with a baby, and when they were getting those reports, had they actually met you? They had just seen pictures of you?
They never met me. They got me sight unseen. So, no, they saw pictures, and I believe Miss Jane Gilbert, her and Mr. Walter are a big part of the agency. I believe that she may have gone back in the middle to check on me, and I think that really brought my parents a lot of comfort. But they didn't see me until they made the flight to get me.
Have they ever talked about what they felt in their hearts that made them want to adopt?
Well, my mom had always, she had the two children, and then she actually was unable to have more children after that, and they had always wanted more. And so they looked at going through the foster care system, and they looked at, and I didn't know this until a couple of years ago, all the areas that they had tried to go through. And it was just something that was just a really big call that they had on their hearts, but it just never seemed to work out. And then basically the second they moved to Thomasville, they found out. So I was really glad they moved to Thomasville.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they never would have found out.
Yeah.
So it was just something that they had always wanted to do. And it wasn't Russia specifically or international specifically, but once they found out about me and saw my picture, it was like the Lord was like, that's her, that's your daughter.
And has that always given you just great encouragement to know that you were absolutely chosen?
Yes, it has. I think adoption is a wonderful thing, and I've worked in adoption for several years, and I think it's an incredible thing. because on the one hand, people can say, well, look at all the, there's children that, can you imagine not being wanted? But then on the other hand, can you imagine being wanted so much that somebody would go to that great effort to get you and bring you home? I actually had a man several years ago. People can just be super rude. He told me, I didn't really know him at all. He had just heard that I was adopted through somebody else. And he was sitting there talking to me, and he said, well, how does it feel to know that your parents just basically threw you away because of all of the issues that you had, and to know that you were just basically left for nothing? And I said, well, I wasn't. I was chosen by my parents. That I don't know about the people in Russia, but I wasn't thrown away. I was chosen. And that's what God does with us. He chooses us.
That's right.
You never know. It's all in your perspective and how you look at it. We can either choose to believe we've been rejected or choose to believe we've been chosen.
There's a lot of people who battle rejection. I talk to a lot of people who have that issue, and I've even battled that myself. I don't know sometimes if it's a thing with women.
Yeah.
But I can literally have somebody that I think ignores me, and I'll think they hate me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I do that too. Yeah.
But, it probably has nothing to do with me. They're probably busy and they're just going about their business, and they don't have time to notice you, Angie. Pride,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. We do internalize that. So when you were growing up in Thomasville, when did you first learn that you were adopted? When did your parents share that with you?
I don't remember, because they always made it part of our life story. So there was never a moment where they're like, we're going to sit you down and tell you about your past. So it was always just like, we went to Russia and got you and brought you home. And that was before like all of the really Instagram friendly gotcha days and videos. And, that was before all of that. But it was just always a part of our life story. And I was always really proud of it. So it wasn't something that was not discussed. And having worked in adoption, I think that's the absolute best way to approach it, is very openly and positively, and it not be something that you hide. And adoption's not a negative thing, or finding out that you were adopted, like a wonderful thing. So
yeah, and I agree with you on that. We've come a long way with that in our society, because I've talked to people from different generations who were adopted, and for whatever reason, that used to be one of those things that people would hide from their children. And like you said, no, I mean, you were specifically chosen by your family. God brought y'all together.
Yes.
And I don't know why in the past that was so hard for people to share with their children.
I don't know either. But I'm glad that the times seem to be shifting. That there are still some. I've talked to some parents who would call the adoption agency and say, I still haven't told my daughter. She's 17. How do I tell her? I said, well, you should have told her a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful that my parents always made it part of the story, part of our family story. Otherwise, I would have missed out on a huge part of my heritage and where I came from, which would be really sad. So,
have you ever had any curiosity about tracking down your birth parents?
Occasionally, not in like I have loose ends to be tied. Like I have wonderful parents and a wonderful family. So I don't feel it necessarily from a place of lack, more out of like curiosity. Like it'd be really cool to see, where they were and what they looked like. I looked them up on Facebook for one afternoon. I know their names and where they lived, and I got lazy after like an hour of searching, and I was like, it's not worth it. I don't know. So, and then it costs money to go through all of the fancy searches. And so, I mean, if it worked out one day, that would be really cool, just to see what they look like, and to tell them I've had a wonderful life. It's not something I'm investing a huge amount of effort into at this point in my life. And everybody's different. I've met a lot of people who are adopted who have a very different perspective on that, but I guess I'm just different in that regard.
And I think you're right, because I was recently talking with Randy Young about that on another podcast. He talked about finding his birth father, and he wanted to know, because the family was starting to have some issues from a medical perspective, and so he wanted to know more about his medical background and just to be able to help his family. And so he pursued that, but it was kind of interesting. It got tabled for a little while, and then it was like God opened the door.
Wow. So you never know.
Yeah, I think it just all depends, like you said, on, is that something that I've just got to satisfy my curiosity? Yeah. Does it have something to do with wanting to find out, what my medical history is? Or
Yes,
whatever.
I would be curious about that. That would be interesting to know. Right now, I just put I don't know on all my medical forms.
True, yeah.
But I mean, truly, as much as any of us can know, it still doesn't secure us for the future. There's
No, it
really
doesn't.
I mean,
that's true.
Life is still life, and what's going to happen is going to happen regardless of what happened in your past. But,
Yes.
So I just try not to worry about that kind of stuff too much. But maybe someday we'll see. I'd like to go back and visit, but again, I've been to other places and haven't been there yet. So maybe someday.
Moving on with your story, I know that you mentioned you and your husband had known one another for a really long time because of his relationship with your brother.
Yeah.
And then you guys just kind of bonded over the office and then did the old-fashioned love letters, which I just think is so neat, and I hope you saved those.
Oh, I did. I've saved a lot of correspondence back and forth.
But at what point did you realize, this is more than a friendship?
I remember exactly when it was. We had been going back and forth. Like, he had sent me his telephone number, and so we started texting back and forth. And again, it was that point. It was kind of weird. I was like, this is so random that I'm talking to this guy that I hadn't seen him in a really long time. I'd seen him maybe once in the past 5 to 10 years. And all of a sudden we started texting back and forth and talking about, it started going from more surface level things to deeper topics. And what is your perspective on this? And I'm a big theological debater. I love to banter back and forth and ask really probing questions about people's beliefs. And it's really fun for me. And he apparently enjoyed that too. But then it went to like, well, this is something that happened today that was funny, or this was something that wasn't so great that happened today. And I remember I was coming home from work and I'd had a really rough day, and he was the first person that I wanted to tell about it. And I thought, that's weird. This is becoming more serious than I thought if he's the first person I wanted to tell about a hard day or a good day. But at that point, I still didn't know that he had any feelings for me. So I was like, well, it could be nothing. As for all I know, he thinks that we're just pen pals, basically. That was a couple of months before he stated his intentions, and he did. He very gentleman-like stated his intentions and said that he said he was coming from Wisconsin and could he take me to lunch. So he drove from Wisconsin.
That is a long way.
Yeah, to take me to Longhorn. And there he stated that he had feelings for me. And so I didn't know going into the lunch if he was going to be like, I don't know, you've really been fun to talk to, but just want to let you know we're just friends. But he said that he had feelings for me, and that through our nearly year-long correspondence that he had grown to really feel for me, and that he was moving back to pursue a relationship with me. So I was very excited about the outcome of that lunch. So I was trying not to get my hopes up, but I do remember that few months before where I started to think, man, I really like this guy. I hope he likes me.
And Sarah, you really encouraged me too when we talked on the phone before we met today, because you talked about the fact that you didn't date.
Nope.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So my parents, were raised me to be very intentional about the whole dating and marriage thing. And I never wanted to date casually or, just willy-nilly have a bunch of boyfriend. I wasn't about that. I was raised with a more mentality that serial dating is practicing divorce, and I didn't want to do that. But you have to meet people and you have to go on dates and figure out who you're going to be with. And so my parents told me, when you're 18, you can court or you can date. And so I waited until I was 18, and then nothing happened. It wasn't like any magical moment happened when I woke up on my 18th birthday. There was nobody around, and I didn't date any in high school. I went to prom and homecoming and that kind of thing. But so then I thought, well, college is going to be my ticket. I'm going to find my husband in college, get my MRS degree. That's really, why you go to college.
A lot of people think that. Yeah, I happen to get one of those.
Yeah. So I went to VSU, and of course you go to all the FCAs and the Baptist collegiate things and all. And you never know who you might meet, and I never met anyone, and so I had never been on a date. I'd never been out with a guy, never anything. And so for a while it was all right, and then my friends started dating and getting engaged and getting married, and then I was the bridesmaids in their wedding, and it seemed like it went on and on for years. And at least if other people were single too, at least they'd been out with people, or at least they'd had a boyfriend, or and I had nothing, and I was like, what is wrong with me? What is going on? There's nobody around. And it wasn't even like, and people, people would make jokes like, well, you just must be turning scores of, and I was like, no, I'm really not turning scores of people away. There's just not, it's just a barren wasteland out there. And I didn't think that I was necessarily too picky. I don't know. And I would have guys that I was interested in, or I would point people out and tell the Lord, like, hey, what do you think about him? I think he might be a good idea. And there was a guy that for a long time I thought this might be, I think this is the guy. And I kept telling the Lord, like, what do you think about him? And the Lord was like, I don't know about him. I had all my ideas, and they never seemed to come to pass. And then it would become clearer to me later why. And I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Like, you knew what you were doing. But I got to a point where I had moved out and got my own apartment, and I was I guess I was like 24 maybe. And I realized that a lot of my life I was living on pause, and I was waiting to get married. And I thought, oh, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to get a new monogrammed thing. Cause what if my monogram is different next year? Or I don't want to cut my hair because what if my husband likes my hair longer? Or what if he won't like the fact that I moved out and live on my own and I'm too independent? And what if he won't like this aspect of my life? Or maybe I should do that. Or maybe I realized I had all these parameters of trying to stay perfectly still rather than just, hey, I'm going to enjoy my life and pray for my husband and not throw it to the side. But God, if you choose to give me this gift of a husband, then that's going to be a wonderful gift, but it's not going to be something that I've earned by my good behavior or by doing checking all the boxes and doing all the right things. And so I just kind of surrendered it. And there's a difference between giving up and surrendering. A lot of times we think that when you surrender something that you're just throwing it away, but you're actually placing it into the hands of God instead of throwing it on the ground and saying, I give up, this dream's over. And I've seen a lot of people do that with marriage. They'll say, there's just nobody around. I give up and I'm happy single. And I don't think that they are. I think that they've given up and that their hope has been deferred. And whereas if you would surrender it and say, I really want this, and it's a desire of my heart, but I'm going to give it to you because you write better stories than I do, and you know what I need better than I do. My type and my list hasn't gotten me very far. So I give you my list. I give you all of the things that I said I wanted and the things I thought I needed, and you can do with that what you'd like. And that's when God can say, all right, let's get to work. And of course, all these stories, I used to hate these stories when I was single. Like, it was right after that God brought my husband, but it really was right after that. So I guess he just had to wait for me to get my ducks in order. So
I'm so glad that you're talking about that, because we have actually talked about this on a couple of other podcasts too. And it just seems to be a theme that keeps coming out is we're better off when we wait for God rather than trying to do things in our time or getting to that magic age of 25, 26 when everybody's saying, aren't you married yet?
Yeah.
You're so much better off waiting on God's best than marrying somebody who truly may not be the right person for you.
Yes.
And I've mentioned this in another podcast. I mean, I've seen that happen now at my age where people they're in miserable situations. And, as Christians too, it's so important to marry someone with whom we are equally yoked.
Yes. It was definitely worth the wait. And anything that I could have contrived before would have been totally wrong just for the sake of wanting to be married. But you want to be married to who God has for you, not who you have for you. Because you don't know it says I think it's in 1 John, it says the heart is wicked. Like we're all told to follow our hearts, but our hearts they don't know what we need. We don't know. And that's why I even challenge girls that are like, well, he has to be this and he has to be this tall and he has to be from this kind of family and I don't want to marry somebody from this and he can't be any older than this. And I love my husband and he is none of the things that I said that I thought that I needed, besides the fact that he loves the Lord and prioritizes family, those which are the most important things.
Without question, those are the most important things. And another thing that I think is really important is the thing that I think I just absolutely loved about my husband was he accepted me lock, stock, and barrel for who I was.
Yes.
And my family too, because we had some issues, and that he loved everybody
Yeah.
from day one. But first of all, he loves Christ.
Yes.
And that's why
That's
he
the
was
most important thing.
right.
Everything flows out of that.
That's
Find a man
right.
that loves the Lord, and everything will flow from that. So, yes, I'm very blessed.
And I know that you've recently made some exciting news on
Yes.
social media.
Yes.
So I would rather you say that than me. So
Well, we actually announced last night on the big world of Instagram and Facebook that we are expecting a baby in February.
congratulations.
So we're very excited about that. Yes. Very excited.
I'm a February baby.
Oh, you are?
Yes, I am.
I'm so excited to have a February baby. Everybody that's born in February is very passionate about being born in February.
Yes.
So I'm excited for my child to have a February.
We're very passionate. I don't believe in horoscopes, but I am a very passionate person about everything. So I don't know if it has to do with being born in February or not, but it's a great month.
It'll be the first one on my side of the family, our first February birthday. So we'll be pretty excited about that.
You know what ends up happening in families, though? It's so interesting. My dad and I were both born in February, and then it ended up being that my niece was born right between us. It seems like families have clusters of birthdays.
Our family does, and none of them they're in like April and November and July, and then that's when our birthdays are in the family. It's kind of funny.
Yeah,
So,
I don't understand that.
I don't either.
But
so maybe we'll make our new cluster of birthdays in February.
Yeah. One other thing that I want to mention, though, that you brought up is just the fact that serial dating can lead to divorce. And I'm not sure I fully understand that. I would like for you to just kind of talk about that a little bit, because I think sometimes we as parents, and now that I have an almost 21-year-old and an 18-year-old, both daughters, I do think about them dating, and I'm thinking, well, this could be preparing them for marriage. But would you mind?
Yeah, so I think some of it has to do with just the culture that we live in, and like, watching Leave It to Beaver and watching them go on a date to the soda fountain back in the 1950s is a little bit different than what our modern idea of dating is. And I think what my parents' mentality was, and I guess like the church culture that I grew up in, was the more that we get into this mindset that it's very normal to have a relationship that you get very serious and attached in, and then to break up if it's just not the right thing, just kind of go into it without a lot of thought, like a lot of prayer, a lot of like, well, this is just fun. We're just in high school. This is just a fun thing. And then you break up, and then you meet somebody else, and then you do the thing again, and then you break up again, and it just becomes normal to end relationships. Like, and there's this mentality that you have to try out a lot of people to find out what you like and what you need. And when that's not God's purpose at all. And of course, everybody has a different journey to get there. So it's not saying that, if you've dated a lot that, that that's not what God planned, or, I can't delve into that, but I wonder if he has less heartbreak in store for us than we have for ourselves when we just try to pick and choose, and we don't really invite him into that area of our lives and say, is this somebody that you want me to be with? Or is this a potential future spouse for me? A lot of people date somebody and they don't really ever think about marrying them. They think, well, we're just dating. We're just casual. We're just getting to know each other and seeing. But when what I would want for my children is to say, if anybody that you're going out with, do they meet those basic qualifications? Now, some people you just have to give a chance, and you don't know, right? You don't know if you're going to marry somebody from hanging out with them one time. But I just believe if we trusted the Lord more in that area and said, lead me to a person that you have for me. It may not be what I had in store for myself, and I think he'll protect us as we follow his leading. He'll give us a relationship that is more protected than if we were just out kind of in the battlefield by ourselves, completely unarmed and just walking around with no plan or no vision. But to go into it with a vision and a plan and say, I want to be married. Help me through that process, not through, I just want to date and have a boyfriend and I don't want to be single.
And as you were talking, that immediately brought up the scripture where Jacob met Rachel.
Yeah.
And if you'll remember, the servant that went with Jacob on that journey was named Ebenezer, which is a picture of the Holy Spirit. And so that servant was acting as a part of the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And when he saw Rachel and when Jacob saw Rachel, they knew that she was the right person for Jacob.
Yeah. And the whole when you know thing, I think it is a divine, there is some divine
I agree.
inspiration to that of, and you don't know until you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't difficult for us. Like, I thought it would be such a complicated process, and it was so easy, and all the things that I worried about they just kind of fell by the wayside when we were both tuned into the Holy Spirit. We're both praying about it, and the path becomes very seamless before you. And I want that for everyone.
I agree with you, and I think that it's good of you to bring up the fact that you were doing a lot of what ifs, and then there's also people out there who have a laundry list of tall, dark, and handsome, and from a good family, and like you said, that may not be the picture of who God has for you at all.
No, and I think sometimes we think that that's from God, and it's really from us, and we've kind of insulated ourselves and almost limited God and what He may have for us. He may just have something right beyond our comfort zone, and say, would you be willing to trust me in that area? Or I know people that have married people from different cultures, and they never plan to marry someone from a different culture, or somebody younger, or somebody older, or there's all these different ways we could limit ourselves. But if we just say, you know what I need better than I do, and just trusting that God has your best interest at heart.
Well, and you mentioned the heart again, and so immediately I'm thinking of that scripture. The heart is deceitful above all else. You're so right. We hear that mantra all the time of trust your heart. We can't trust our hearts.
I know.
So you really are better off, like you said, surrendering your desire, even though speaking your desire, God knows the desires of your heart. But to be able to speak that to Him, to just be honest with Him and say, God, I really do want to be married, but I'm failing miserably at this.
Yeah.
And all the people that are coming through the line here, they're just not what is on my list, and they're not meeting my what ifs. But God has that perfect person for you if it's His plan for you to be married.
He does, and He has the perfect person for us, but not the perfect person. And
there you go. That's such a good way to say it.
There's no person that's gonna meet all of these invisible standards of they have to be this, and they have I think especially as Christians, we can get very high and mighty with the things that we expect of another very flawed human being. And is this person the one? And it can almost, we expect them to be like Jesus incarnate, and they're just a person who is going to have issues of themselves. And I remember, I asked Lucas when we had been dating for like a couple of months. I thought I was asking like a really good question. I was like, what do you feel like the call of God is on your life? And I was expecting like a very, I don't know, youth group kind of answer about like some passionate devotion to this nation across the world, or I don't know, some like I want to be in ministry in this area. And I was expecting a very glamorous answer. And he said, well, I want to be a good husband and a good father, and I want to raise my children to know the Lord. And that was his answer.
Mic drop. Yeah.
And it was so humbling to me, because I was like, that's the most important thing, that when so many people overlook those very steadfast qualities of somebody who's just committed to the Lord and to their family. And we want this social media picture of what that looks like, and a lot of times it's not that way, and we might miss what God has for us if we're looking for it to come in a package that we weren't expecting. But what we really need is somebody who loves the Lord and wants their children to know the Lord. I mean, what more can you ask for?
I agree with you, and really that's in a sense doing what Jesus did for us, because that man will sacrificially lay down his life so that his children can come to a saving knowledge of Christ. And that is the most important thing that we can teach our children.
One other thing that I wanted to mention about my whole dating and engagement period of time was the day after we decided to become official. I woke up and like he had texted me like this really nice text, and I started freaking out, thinking that I had basically signed my life over, and like I wasn't, like I had done this, but I wasn't exactly sure if we were supposed to get, like I really liked him and I felt like God had been leading us in this direction, but I wasn't 100% sure. And so I woke up and I was thinking, oh no, like I have a boyfriend now. What if I don't marry him? Like I don't want to fail. I don't want to have a failed relationship. And because when you don't have any, you don't want to mar your track record. And I started praying, and I was like, Lord, am I going to marry him? Like, you have to tell me today. Otherwise, I can't go on with this relationship if I don't know how it's going to end, which is just a really silly thing to think. But I was thinking that, and I started praying about it, and I was like, okay, Lord, is he the one? Is he the one? I need you to tell me, is he the one? And I was sitting there and I was praying and I was listening to worship music, and I just felt like the Lord said, no, he's not the one. And I was like, oh, I was like, does this mean that I guess this means that we have to break up? And then I started thinking, well, now I've got to, and I just like, I have all this anxiety over thinking that I had made a mistake already. And the Lord, I just felt like the Holy Spirit was kind of speaking to me, and he said, he's not the one, I'm the one. He said, there is this one, you've made that up in your mind. He said, he's a gift that I'm giving you, but I'm the only one that can satisfy your soul. There is no other one on earth for you. I'm that. Anything else I give you is a gift, and I want you to enjoy this gift that I'm giving you. Don't think that it's the be all end all of your existence. And I've always remembered that since that moment, like, and to see my husband as a gift and not as a completion to, or a satisfaction to who I am, or he offers a lot of that, but that's not what he was put on earth to do. He was put on earth to help me, to be a partner to me, but Jesus is the only one for any of us. He's it.
And that goes back to one of those things that's a falsehood in our society, because one of the famous quotes from the Jerry Maguire movie is, "You complete me."
Yeah.
And I think every girl would love for a guy to say that to her.
Yeah.
But you're so right that we are never, ever going to be satisfied unless the very maker of our soul is where we get our satisfaction. Yeah. And we're going to look at things in our husbands or our wives, if you're a man, and we're going to see those flaws. Mm-hmm. And God helps us love and see that spouse through his eyes.
Yes.
When we're getting our satisfaction from him.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that the relationship that you guys have and the relationship you have in Christ must have been a huge anchor, because I know that you're pregnant now, but it wasn't as easy as that. And do you mind talking a little bit about just the pregnancy process?
So as I mentioned, we got married in December, right before Christmas. I became pregnant immediately after we got married. We decided that we see children as a blessing from the Lord, and we had no desire to prolong that. And we both feel that there's no magic moment when you're ready to be a parent, that you just decide, all right, we're married, and we want to trust the Lord in that area, and that's an area that we want to trust the Lord in. And so we were thrilled. We became pregnant right away. Start of our marriage, we were just absolutely thrilled, preparing for a baby, and it seemed like all the stars had aligned for us. You know, we got exactly what we prayed for and wanted. And then in February, the very end of February, I ended up having a miscarriage, and that nothing could have surprised me more than that. Like, that was not, like, until it was actually literally happening, I had never even thought that might happen to me. Like, I'm in really good health. I take my vitamins. I was like, okay, Lord, I trusted you. We waited until we got married. We wanted to have children. We didn't ever prevent having children. Like, I thought I was doing all the right things. Like, why would I be punished with that? And it felt like it felt like I had done something wrong to have that happen. We were just completely blindsided. It was never, I didn't wake up every day thinking, is something wrong? I just was very carefree, and everything's great, and I'm super healthy, and I feel great during this pregnancy. And then, we went to the midwife, and she couldn't find a heartbeat, and it was just the most awful experience. And then, we went on to have that. It's a very tragic, for anybody who's been through it, it's a very tragic and traumatic experience, no matter what it looks like, or, it's different for every couple. But I mean, we'd been married less than 90 days, and we were already going through this like incredible hardship, and just wondering, okay, well, we weren't prepared for that. Like, we kind of have this thought that if we do things right, then God will bless us, and if we check all our boxes, then he'll check all of his. And I wouldn't say that to anybody who'd had a miscarriage before, like that they had done something wrong. Of course you don't think that, but when it happens to you, you think, well, I must have done something.
What am I doing
Yeah,
wrong?
and all I've ever wanted is to have children and to be a mother, and now that's being jeopardized, and the enemy just starts lying to you and saying, this may be it for you, and you're not meant to do this, and it's a very strong internal battle. But we just immediately, in the middle of what we were going through, we just decided that God was good and he was writing a good story, and that he didn't cause it to happen. We don't believe that he causes bad things like that to happen, but I believe that he will use them. And so that was the mentality that we adopted as we walked through it, that this is not the end of our story. This is something that we don't understand, but it rains on the unrighteous and the righteous, and none of us is exempt from suffering. Can we trust God and believe that he's still doing something good? And, can we believe for better news down the road? And so we did. And I really believe that the Lord helped us through that season. It wasn't easy, and it's definitely not easy. It's given me so much more compassion for other women who have gone through that, because when you hear about it and you've never experienced it, it's kind of like oh, I'm so sorry you had a miscarriage. Like, oh, how far? Well, at least, how far along were you? And you just kind of ask these questions, and it doesn't matter how far along you were or what. I mean, it was something that you were excited about that was growing inside of you that's no longer there, and it's very tragic. And so it's given me a lot more compassion for other women who have experienced it, and to be able to, I talked with somebody just last week who had she recently had a miscarriage, and in the past my response would have just been a very glazed over, oh, I'm so sorry. Now, having been through it myself, it was I am so like that.
You knew what that feels like.
I know it's the worst thing that my husband and I have ever been through as individuals. So it's given me a lot of compassion in that area. I don't know why it happened or what, and I could try to analyze it and figure it out and get really in depth about my history and all of that kind of stuff. But we just don't know sometimes. Whole mentality this go around is like night and day from last time. We were even talking about it yesterday, about how all of the things that we took for granted now before, we are just so thankful for now, and it's given us such a heightened awareness. And I think that when anybody goes through a trial in their lives, it makes you thankful. Like the things that you took for granted before, you're now really thankful for. Like when I was feeling nauseous, I would just be so thankful that I was having that symptom, that meant that my body was doing what it was supposed to do.
Right.
Or if I didn't feel well, if I felt tired, or my clothes start to get too small, like all the things that before I might have complained about, now I'm just so incredibly thankful for. And every day is a gift, and we don't take it for granted at all. So, and I don't think that God was trying to teach us that lesson, and that's why he made it happen. But I think that he's going to take whatever happens, and he's going to try to turn it good.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm so glad that you also brought up the fact that when we start going through something that we don't understand, and we're wondering, why are we going through this? I can remember with my husband and myself, we went through financial problems, and that when I first started having all this crash down on me, I'm like, God, we've been given tithes. Yeah. We've been given offerings. So why am I felt like I was being punished.
Us? Yeah.
And then, like you said, I was able to get to a point where I realized God had chosen us to go through that. No, he didn't cause it, because he didn't cause anything bad. But I really felt like I was chosen to go through it. Yeah. And there were some things inside of me that I knew needed to be conformed more to the image of Jesus Christ. And so if I've got to go through a little bit of suffering here on this earth to be conformed more to his image, it's worth it. Yeah.
It definitely, you definitely see how the Lord wants to, he's always working in us. He's never not working. He's always trying to teach us something and show us something through our circumstance. I definitely have needed to learn a lot throughout, and especially the being pregnant again, and it being a totally different experience. And the temptation is to just be anxious every day and to wonder, is everything okay? Is something wrong? Or if I feel good, does that mean the baby's still growing? Or if I feel bad, does that mean something's wrong? And it's just, the temptation is to be very worried and anxious all the time, and always on well, maybe I shouldn't get my hopes up, because it could happen again. And it's just not a godly way to think. And it makes you depressed. And this, with the internet, you can sit online and look at articles all day that won't encourage you and that won't make you feel hope about your sin, but it becomes a very conscious thing of I need to choose to believe good, and I need to choose to have hope and to be excited and to be joyful. Like, that's what he's commanded us to do regardless of our circumstances. So I don't get a pass because I've been through something. Like, I'm still required to do the same things I would have been required to do before, but it's definitely a different journey when you've had a bad experience, to not wallow in that. Is going to your appointments and is everything okay, and buying stuff. Well, why do I really want to tell people? Because I don't want to have to go back and untell them. And like, even posting it last night was kind of like a big thing. Like, well, and in the back of your mind, it's like, well, something could still happen. And honestly, anything could happen at any point.
Yeah.
And I don't want the enemy to steal our joy in this season because I'm scared. And that's what he would love to do with any of us, is to keep us from sharing what he's done in our lives because we're scared of what people are going to think or what people are going to say, and he doesn't get to have that much power.
Going back, it's just, we could what if something to death, couldn't we?
Yeah.
You just have to be grateful for each moment, each day that you're given, and that goes back to what you were talking about too, just being grateful. Lord, thank you that, I'm throwing up today because that means I'm supposed to be. And we're spoiled in this country. The things that we sometimes let upset us and things that we have a tendency to worry about, people in other countries where they are just looking for their next morsel of bread, they're looking at us thinking, really, you're upset that your SUV got a scratch on it?
Yeah, puts things in perspective.
You have just given so many people so much encouragement today, and a couple of themes that I've just seen in your story as you've been talking today is, again, just not to trust your heart, not to lean on our own understanding, but to trust God with whatever he's doing in our lives, to know that he does have good plans for us if we'll just surrender our will. You're not saying give up your desire, but just surrender your will to his plan. And he has just a buffet of things waiting for us.
Yeah, that's C.S. Lewis talks about that too. Like, we thought we were getting this nice little cottage or whatever, and he talks about, but like, he has a palace. He has so much more planned for us than what we've set up for ourselves if we'll just surrender it to him. I do have one thing I'd like to add regarding my adoption story. It's exciting, like, it's fun to share about being from Russia and that kind of thing, and when people hear that, it tends to get people's attention, and it's always a nice fun fact to share in an icebreaker circle or something like that. Being adopted from Russia is, it's an easy fun fact, but I never really considered like the magnitude of what goodness God had done in my life. It was just always kind of like a fact, like, and my parents had made it it was a very normal thing, like, yeah, I'm from Russia, but I'd never really considered the depth of what that meant. And I was actually at an adoption conference, Christian Alliance for Orphans, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I was in line for the lunch meal, and this lady was asking, how I'd come to be at the conference. And so I gave her like this really quick rundown of how I worked at the Open Door Adoption Agency, and I had actually was adopted from Russia myself. And isn't it funny? Like, my boss actually found me in the orphanage, and so he's known me longer than my parents have. And like, so I came from Russia, and now I work at the adoption agency and have grown up in the town. I just kind of ran through it like I'm doing now, very quickly and very like nonchalantly. And I looked at her, and as I was not really paying attention, I was just hungry and ready to move on. She had tears in her eyes, and she was like, "That is such an amazing story." I just kind of, I almost wanted to laugh because I was like, "It's not an amazing story. Like, it's just my life. Like, there's nothing great about it." I mean, and I just felt like an immediate conviction from the Holy Spirit that, just your life. Like, I took great care to write that story. Like, I thought it was a good story, and I put a lot of thought and effort into how I made your life come to be what it is, and you're just like passing it off as like, it's just my life. And I think a lot of us have a tendency to do that, and we don't want to share what God's done in our lives because it's like, oh, well, there's nothing special about what I just live in Thomasville. I've never really done anything great or gone anywhere. And I think it's almost, an offense to the Father who says, there's nothing accidental about your life. orchestrated every step. Like, I don't write sad, pathetic stories. Like, I write good stories, and I'm writing a good story with your life if you'll accept that and believe that and be willing to share it. But I think the enemy has tricked us into believing that our stories aren't worth sharing. And so that we don't talk about the goodness of God, because that's the last thing that he would want. But if we would believe that there's something not of value in us, but of something of value like in what the Lord has done through us, it's not us.
Right.
We're not the author. But if we would say, I don't think that what I have been through is all that spectacular, but I see the hand of God in it, and I want to bring glory to him. So whatever I can do to share I'm going to do that. And it's really changed my perspective on sharing my life story. It's like, well, it may not be that interesting to me, but it's not about me.
You never know what may have happened in your life that can really touch somebody's heart. And that's one of the things that I've tried to convey in this podcast too, is there may be some stories that we hear that, you were just crying, you're thinking, how in the world did that person ever get through it? And of course that's going to touch your heart, but there may be somebody who just has the most simple of stories.
Yeah.
And they may say just one thing, and you never know, because we're all so different.
Yeah.
And we are intricately woven together, and what God's doing in our lives too. We can't always see what's going on behind the scenes, but there are so many factors that are having to come into play for you to have been that little baby that at 4 months old, the Gilberts just happened to go over to Russia. They're wanting to start this whole overseas adoption thing, and they happen to go to this one orphanage where there's little baby Sarah Taylor Shearer. And your family just happened to come to Thomasville and met these people, and next thing you know,
it's all God.
They are adopting you. And for all of that to come into play, we probably have no idea how many people that we'll never know were on the fringes involved in making all of that happen. But God's steering it all.
Yeah, he did. And he knows, and he wants to do, he has that for all of us if we'll just open our eyes and see that. And I actually, I've written a book that is about the very same thing. About it's called Extraordinary, and about how all of us have the invitation to live an extraordinary life, even if we never leave our hometown. And it's not left up to people who have really exciting lives to have exciting lives. And like what we've judged that to be is far from accurate. Can we have an incredibly purposeful, fulfilling existence, checking people out at Publix, or being a third grade teacher, or being a small town doctor, or being a stay-at-home mom of, homeschooling your kids? Like, the invitation is the same for all of us if we will accept it and recognize God's like intense pleasure with our daily lives. Like, there's not some waiting for moment, or some maybe down the road my calling will kick into gear. Like, your calling is happening. Like, it's happening right now today.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it? And can you see the hand of God in your everyday mundane existence?
I do think as Christians we struggle with that. I used to tell my mentor, I would just say, I just feel like I need to be doing something more. I just feel like I need to be doing something more. And she used to just say, Angie, just if you can just abide in the Lord today, it's been a good day.
Yeah. We have all these ridiculous standards for what enough is, or what, just be with the Lord today. That's what I'd like to encourage people with.
I want to encourage anybody who may need prayer. Yes. They can contact me at Angie@revealedpodcast.org. Thank you so much for your courage.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.